And we are live.
We are live. Good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us. This is Kelly Buffet. I'm the president of the Heed Consulting Group, and today we are actually having a very exciting event of the do's and don'ts of cyber insurance. This is a roundtable discussion, and we have some very distinguished and honored guests that will be joining us in our roundtable today. First up, we will have Mr. Michael Bowers, who is our CEO of Heed Consulting Group, and he is a designated Toastmaster and has been an IT professional with experience for over 25 years. I like to point that out because I like to remind him how much older he is than I am. He is the founder of PM Business Solutions and has been a very successful IT firm owner for over 25 years. Also, we have Kirsten Bay, who is the CEO of Cysurance. She brings more than 25 years of experience in risk intelligence, information management, and policy expertise, and has been with them for the past 6 years. Also, we will hear from Donald Carter, who is, Jafir Young will be up next. He is the senior account specialist at Markel Insurance. And he is a licensed property and casualty broker and experienced as a senior underwriter and has a history of working in the insurance industry for many years. And then finally, we'll also be joined by Donald Carter, who is the chief financial officer of Green Fruit Avocado, with some on-hand experience of what it's like to be in an executive role and having to procure cybersecurity insurance and use the application in a claims environment. So thank you so much for joining us, and thank you so much for our table of panelists. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Michael Bowers and allow him to take it away. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kelly. I appreciate you. Good morning to everybody, and thank you for attending. Just want to go back a little bit and just kind of touch a little bit on everybody from a personal experience and engagement with everybody. Going back to Kirsten. Kirsten, as you mentioned before, is the CEO of Cysurance. I'm going to take us back to the slide just to give her a little bit of a point out here. She has been this for over 7 years, but she's had a lot of really important positions, but she's really fighting for the cyber insurance for small businesses and acts as a real advocate for making sure their policies are available. And so Cysurance is one of our partners and helps us get cyber security insurance to our clients really quickly and makes it a turnkey solution so that the customer doesn't have to think about it. So Cysurance is making it very available and taking away the friction when it comes to getting small businesses insured under cyber insurance. Jafir Young, we met about a year ago. Kelly, you were with me when we met with Jafir at an educational event, and Jafir is actually one of the speakers. And so Jafir is very passionate as well about getting businesses insured, and Markel themselves, a big underwriter and covers a lot of cyber insurance to small businesses. They have a reputation of just making sure the customer is being paid, especially as we go into a little bit later about the current climate. About some are paying, some are not, some are trying to find ways out of paying. Markel has always been there to pay right away, really quickly, and he's always made that very clear that that's what they're about, as well as his personal passion about making sure that people understand what is out there and how they can benefit from it. And then there's Donald. Donald Carter is one of our clients and has been for some time now. We've actually worked with Donald at several companies, first starting off with Specialized Bikes, and then moving on to a large-scale laundry equipment manufacturer, and now with Green Fruit Avocados, always overseeing the entire operations of those organizations and being responsible for everything from, at times, literally HR, all the way down to literally every kind of insurance you can think of. Something even scared me, which is ransom insurance, but when you're having to travel. As a matter of fact, I was at the office one day with them, and they were on their way to Mexico, and the CEO and some other partners were walking out, and they were talking about ransom insurance. Not ransomware, ransom, like human, let me take you. And he's like, oh, I already got you guys covered. Don't worry, ransom insurance is in place. So Donald, as a CFO, looks out for risk management for the entire organization, and specifically today, we're going to be referencing his cyber experience and having to file claims. So just a little bit more about everybody. And I want to thank everybody again for being here. And let's go ahead and get started with the current cyber landscape. So, okay, first of all, how's everybody doing? Kirsten, how are you this morning?
Excellent. Thank you for having me today. Nice to be here.
We love having you here. Thank you for participating and agreeing to be here. Jafir, I think Jafir is having he's shopping in and out on his Donald. How are you doing there? I see you're connected. Donald, can you hear me? I know Donald was breaking out his laptop, and he's also a very, very busy CFO, but we'll check back with him in a second. Jafir, can you hear me? Are you there? Oh, let me make sure I do both of these for both of you guys. There we go. I'm sorry, Donald, can you hear us?
Can you hear me there?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah, I can hear you now. My apologies. I had added you to the stream. And Jafir, I kind of see you sideways there.
Okay, here we go. Sorry.
There you go. Let me see. You might want to rotate your. I know you said you're having some problems with your laptop this morning. Is that what's going on? Are you on your phone right now?
Yeah, I'm on my phone right now. How am I? Am I all right there?
Okay, no. You're doing good. And Donald, you there, right?
Yes, I'm here. I'm here. Yes.
Great. Thank you, Donald. Thank you for being here. I hope you heard everything I said. I know you were on mute, but so yeah, I appreciate you being here as well. And Jafir, also, I know you're working from home there with a nice cool fan. You're the only one we can say go live with the camera because you got the really cool hairdo. Me, on the other hand, I look like I flash back to the 70s, and it's not quite as even as it should be. So I'm gonna go ahead and go with the profile shot. But once again, I appreciate everybody for being here, and I thank you very much. Jafir,
Yeah,
I know if you can rotate your camera. I don't know if you're gonna get seasick or not, but it's okay if you can't. Anyway, I want to go ahead and put the first question out there to you guys. As I mentioned, we want to talk about the current threat landscape out there and what's happening. And so, with that being said, I'm gonna throw this out there first. I'm gonna go ahead and start with you there, Kirsten. If you can tell us kind of what you've been seeing out there as far as claims and the attacks that are happening, what have you seen?
Well, it's been an interesting time for sure, and it's interesting to have literally transitioned overnight from everyone being in offices with secure networks and VPNs and all the good stuff that makes us feel like we can cruise around the internet and be safe, to going home with our kids on Zoom and we're on Zoom and who knows what's happening all over the household, and that has resulted in like a 600% increase in risks towards organizations. So it's interesting because in some ways it's not different from the standpoint the same types of attacks are happening. Ransomware, certainly malware attacks around keystroke loggers and stealing banking credentials and the things that you would read in the newspaper anyway, but they're increasing substantially in terms of their attack profile. And then the fact, of course, that people are distributed, it's having a much more widely distributed impact on companies across the board as opposed to being more isolated into a particular network environment.
Yeah. Jafir, do you want to chime in on that?
Yeah, sure. From the insurance market perspective, we kind of saw it coming for the last year or so. We definitely see some firming and trending into hardening of our market. What we're seeing is a lot of carriers out there are really guarded about how much capacity they're deploying on insurance programs. So whereas before folks would give, $10 million in limits for a song, now, it seems like $5 million in limits, depending on the size of the organization, seems kind of like more standard. Also, to follow up with that, we're seeing certain things excluded now because the market is basically hardening. So certainly improper handling of consumer data. Cyber policies were never intended to, cover those types of issues that are emerging because of new new regulation for privacy, like BIPA, Biometric Information Privacy Act, the CCPA, California Consumer Privacy Act. So we don't want to protect how people print, intercept, dispose, collect, record their own data. We want to make sure that's done correctly. And also we're seeing certainly more sublimits in ransomware.
So now, I mean, I know you, as an underwriter, you're not really dealing with the claims from the users and so forth. But I mean, are you seeing that, as Kirsten was, alluding to, that there's a lot more either ransomware, or you're getting more phishing attacks, or has there been anyone that has spiked more than another recently? From your perspective?
Yeah, fantastic question. What we're definitely seeing, especially on title and escrow, we certainly see more social engineering, folks who are duped into transferring money to an incorrect account, a fraudulent account. But above and beyond everything, ransomware is the new, I guess, problem, if you will, across the industry. Before, we were seeing smaller demands for ransomware to get the encryption keys to unlock systems. Now, across the board, we're seeing, $1 million demands for ransomware. So that has everyone's undivided attention across the industry.
Oh, wow. And now, Kirsten, I know that as you deal with a lot of the smaller businesses, especially as you deal with other MSSPs like us, what types of like demands and like numbers are you seeing that are being very common from a lot of claims?
Well, what Shakir said is absolutely correct. The thing that we're seeing is this proliferation of the "Are you okay?" ransomware strain, which is the one that does two really bad things. One is that it roots so that they can just observe what you're doing, so they can do things like invoice manipulation. They can do social engineering to do basic currency theft. And then once they feel they've led you, then they go ahead and drop the ransom in onto the machine, lock down the network or machines. And what we're seeing is that the ransomware demands are substantially higher. And then now that we've seen some other ones that are basically going to extort you, where they're going to start less direct, like you say, the ransom, they're going to cut the pinky in the mail, that they're starting to bleed out people's information onto the net until they just start paying those ransoms. So those are the ones that are really starting to worry people. And obviously for smaller organizations, we've seen this with some healthcare organizations where they've just gone out of business because the data recovery component was just insurmountable for them. Even with some insurance in place, they couldn't get it back quickly enough to stay solvent. And so they shut down the practices because of that.
It's funny you say that. I mean, I won't say funny, but ironic, I guess you could say, because we once had a client a few years back that their backups, the software had changed to the location of a key component of like their database, and so their backups had not been updated to reflect that. And so they had hardware failure, and they thought that a simple data recovery was going to solve the issue. But they ended up losing about 6 months worth of all the data entry and patients and information, and all the stuff was just lost. And so it set them back about 3 years to recover from all that time. And then it also caused the practice to shut down because everybody was now upset. The morale was down. They're having to work overtime, so they're paying even more to get the work done. Not to mention they're slow to make claims. So like all the effects of not having that data above and beyond the recreation of that data, and the time it took away, if that almost killed the company on a very small, just hard drive failure. And now, Donald, I know that you've had some similar experiences where you've had people you've had some attacks even recently. What kind of attacks do you guys see in your employees? What are you dealing with on a daily basis?
Well, thank you, Mike. Yeah, so we're in the food industry. We sell avocados, and as I mentioned before, and so with my industry, we do sell domestically as well as internationally. We source avocados from Colombia and Peru, and we're selling to China. So, a lot of my principals and employees are traveling abroad, and so these individuals, they go to these different, trade shows and different events and things like that, where they come familiar with your company. It's like, let's see what kind of, basically what kind of security they have on the systems. As you mentioned before, you have worked with me on several of my companies. So, we do take as much precaution as we can to, put in place proper, networking and proper firewalls, proper, VPN credentials, and all of this good stuff to basically minimize any type of phishing attack. But as you mentioned, I did experience a ransomware, and I heard about it. And this was kind of early on. This was like 4 or 5 years ago. Early on, when it was ransomware was becoming really abundant, and so I was at a manufacturing facility. I was a CFO there. Our systems were kind of antiquated. I just started, I think, about a month earlier, so I was in the process of talking to Michael about upgrading systems and putting all these different things in place to protect the infrastructure. And literally during the middle of our process, before we even got started, got hit with the ransomware. I was just getting rid of our old IT guy, and he didn't know what to do with it. I said, dude, I've heard about this, and I've seen it on TV, but you don't really think it's going to ever happen to you. We were not some $5 billion company. We were, a couple of $100 million company, nothing small, but nothing that really just stands out that they're going to just, really just hit us. And unfortunately, our systems that we had, locked down us unable to produce because our computers controlled a lot. We have robotics and things like that in the back where we had drawings and cutting out metals and sheet metals, a lot of robotics in the back, and all of that came to a standstill. I had 75 to 100 employees basically sitting around for a week and a half until we got that situation fixed.
Man, so now I know. So I can only imagine what that kind of a cost would be on the company. Not to mention morale, but I know I've also spoken with you about insurance, and you've always seemed to be someone who's very, very well insured. And I appreciate you, and thank you for sharing that that intimate experience, Donald. And I know that as a result of that, you've gone ahead and been very conscious of the types of insurance that you guys have. And,
Absolutely.
And so in doing so, I know you have cyber insurance right now.
Yes.
What do you know what kind of coverage you have?
Yes. So I do have cyber insurance, and after that phishing attack, I started calling. Something I was like, wow, that whole ordeal with the ransomware costed literally $20,000 in cash. I had to go to my bank and buy Bitcoins. And at the time, I didn't even think it was real money. It was 5-6 years ago. You see it on TV, you think it's monopoly money, right? So I'm like, Bitcoins, and I was like, that's a real money? Like, people really take that as a currency? So I'm literally going to my bank, running to a local liquor store with $20,000, right? So, can you imagine that? Not the best neighborhood. And I walk in there, hey, I need to buy, $20,000 worth of Bitcoins. So, I won't even go into the safety and, all the, things that are going through my head. Like, who walks in the liquor store with, this kind of cash? But after that event, I realized there was an area of exposure that I needed to fill that void. And so I was, talking to my insurance guy, and I said, hey, do you guys have something for, I didn't know what it was called. I was like, to protect the computer, like if we get hacked or go down, or yeah, we have cyber insurance. I said, oh, cyber, like cyber, yeah. So he been on to explain to me about the different level of coverages and what you have to do and so forth. And to my surprise, the cyber insurance is a very small cost for a lot of coverage, right?
Yeah.
I think I don't know what any premium, but I'm gonna say it was definitely less than 10,000, probably around an area of 3 to 4, maybe 5,000. But it gives you $5 million worth of coverage in most cases. What I have, it covers cyber attacks, it covers phishing attacks. If the company's down, it'll pay for downtime and all of these things. Any kind of damage to any other customers that we incur, it covers that. So it's pretty comprehensive. It covers not only me, it covers the employees, and it covers our customers if they should become harmed due to this this attack. Meaning, in the event of, like, let's say they get into our system and all of a sudden our customers start saying, "Hey, send me a wire." You know, these people are sending out wires that they think they're sending them to Greenfruit, but they're not. It will cover it.
That's interesting. So you have not just a business interruption for your own self, but if you cause an interruption, or if you cause a cyber incident to one of your vendors, that you're covered for that as well.
Yes, that is correct.
So now, Jafir or Kirsten, I'd like to put that to you guys. I mean, I've never actually heard of that. I've heard on the other side of that. That is an area of risk. But when it comes to type of coverage, I'm gonna put this to you, Jafir. How would Markel handle that, or is that like a one plan, or how does that work?
Yeah, great question. So basically, I tend to, teach cyber policies that they have two sides. You have the harm to other side, the liability side, which is, basically standard insurance. And then you have the consulting side, if you will, the breach mitigation side. So generally speaking, there's different coverage parts that are available in the market. There's network security. There's network business interruption, which is basically the additional expenses that an insured might incur to manage a breach, if you will. So that could be forensics, which we consider, first-party coverages. Also, the breach mitigation piece, which is call centers, credit monitoring, notification. So a lot of different, post-breach consulting activities that are required to find out, okay, well, who's been impacted, and how can the situation best be managed. Also, speaking to the point on Bitcoin, well, we as a carrier, we have multiple Bitcoin wallets. So, one wouldn't have to go to a shady neighborhood to buy, Bitcoin.
Right.
And sadly, the thing that I've heard before, said many times in many conferences, is if one tries to manage a breach by themselves, they're going to do it wrong.
Yeah.
So really, risk transfer makes sense. And if I could just pivot and comment on a few different points in terms of claim possibilities. Well, there's negligent release of data. There's phishing scams, lost laptops, and do not forget paper records. Some people, like healthcare providers, they transition to electronic medical records, and maybe they think they can go and, dispose of their historical paper records in the dumpster. Well, boom, that's a breach. Just a few comments on that.
So I'm gonna come back to that. I want to give Kirsten an opportunity to chime in on that, but I want to talk to you a little bit more about that, Jafir.
Sure.
I do have a follow-up question, but Kirsten, if you would go ahead and say what you want to go ahead and say on that.
Yes, well, I was thinking as Jafir was analogizing, I always talk about it in relationship to car insurance. Think of first party is you crash your car and it gets fixed. Third party is you're fixing somebody else's car, and to really help people think about what that means. And these are all the right things to be out, especially around the what we call the contingent harms, the harms to your customers. And also what we look at is the disaster recovery business continuity aspects and elements of these policies that can really help people beyond cyber bad guy discussions, but also the utilizing these policies as a true risk transfer tool, as you said, where, for example, like we also have a non-malicious coverage clause where if there are widespread power outages that take networks down, or your payment card processing down, or any of those things that might impact your business in a normal business environment type function, that those are also pieces that can kick in to support your business beyond things like malicious acts. And policies are getting to be the point where you can utilize them really side by side your business liability. But at the same time, it's important to be very clear about the lines of demarcation between your general liability policies and cyber policies, because the cyber policies really do, as they say, stand alone. They're standalone policies that really do protect you around what would be your digital footprint, even to things like trademarks and patents and other elements that exist in the digital space and websites and other intellectual property. Those things need to also be reviewed as you're looking at what might be covered in a cyber liability policy.
No, that's very good. And as you were mentioning, the different types of, what's included and what's not included, one of the things that's really important for people to know are the different, the wording in your policies to make sure that you are covered for certain things. And I guess having a good broker to explain the different areas is, I guess, important to know, because, like what Donald was saying, he's experienced different things because of, they got to deal with certain vendors. I know last week we were just talking about a Costco and Walmart integration. And so I know that if Walmart's saying, listen, we need to make sure that whatever you're going to deliver, we're going to have. And so, he has to think about this continuity through the whole supply chain, where other companies are saying, well, we're not really part of anybody's supply chain. But when things like, COVID-19 hits and now they can't work, I know, Jafir, you and I were recently talking about where, that's a business interruption insurance. But as you just mentioned right now, Kirsten, if for some reason who you're working with now is impacted by that, but, their systems are down, how does that impact, that seems like there's a lot of areas to cover. And I don't know if there's any are there like combo meals for packages where you can have a true continuity kind of a package, or is there like what I'm saying, like a turnkey, this should cover everything kind of a plan? Like, how should somebody approach that?
Well, I can kind of touch on that maybe a little bit there, Mike. Is that all right?
I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead and Jafir. I'll let you go ahead and chime in after that, Kirsten.
Yeah, so there are modular policies out there that basically they aggregate the various exposures and they put them in different basically coverage parts, if you will. So usually some of the more broader forms permit an insurer to pick and choose their deductibles, pick and choose their limits for each particular coverage part, and then you get a price for that. And I will echo a prior comment that right now the price is not as cost prohibitive.
What do you mean by that?
Okay, it's not expensive. You can get a lot of limit for basically a lower premium.
Oh, okay. So that's kind of what Donald was saying a while ago
exactly.
about it's not very expensive to get a good coverage blanket. Kirsten, what were you going to say? I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, I was going to say a similar thing. What I would say the biggest challenge in this environment is for especially small businesses who don't have risk teams and all of these different people who support you in these decisions, is there's no real standardization. In many other types of insurances, there's a fair amount of standardization people can utilize to get a base product. So that was one of the things we tried to solve, was to provide as comprehensive and standardize the program to be able to help people, especially small businesses, get what the best and best they could get. And yes, certainly the pricing is still quite good. And we're seeing, especially with the COVID pieces, the pricing is starting to become much more fluid and tighter than we've seen. But they're, in terms of what the relationship to the revenue, I'm seeing it's a fractional number. But I still get a little bit of oh my gosh, that's $2,500. Well, yes, but you're getting $2.5 million worth of coverage for full-blown ransom. So it's everything from managing the event to setting up your Bitcoin wallet to getting you recovery, taking care of your customers. And when you think about the fact that the ransom is a cost, but that remediation typically for these businesses is running 10 to 20 times the cost of the claim, like the ransom itself. This is really where people just they can't afford that piece of it. And that's really where one consider what those costs really mean.
Wow.
I agree. Yeah, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Hi, this is Donald. I would like to add something also, that, me as an insured, as a user, one thing that people that sit in my chair should know, or if they have an IT person that sits on the side of them, that, the cyber attacks are real. They do happen, and you can get insurance for it. But, just because you get insurance, it's not automatic. Okay. Meaning that you as the principal of the company have to put in place certain level of precautions or certain things. Not like you just plug your computer in, okay, we're covered. It doesn't work that way. You have to demonstrate to the insurance company that you do have an IT person, that you do have a person that is going through boundary checks, and that you're doing the updates and you keep records of these things, and that your accesses levels, through your company, your employees are managed, managed access. So, and that you have proper, I'm going to call it virus protection, firewalls, and all of these different things. They don't require a lot, but they do require that you have some level of protection. So just, you're just not sitting there with your, with your door wide open. It's like any insurance. They want to make sure that your doors are, when you go home for the night, your doors are locked, the windows are secure, you got an alarm. All these little things are needed to protect the infrastructure for the person just walking by, just kind of like grabbing the door. So I wanted to at least make that very apparent, because a lot of people think, well, I plugged it in and I got the Norton virus, and that should be sufficient, and it's really not.
Yeah, that's a good point, Donald. And that's something that we come across a lot, especially when people think that since they bought something, especially if they paid a lot of money for it a few years ago, they're like, listen, I've already checked that off my box of things to do with the business. But oftentimes one arm part of the company is not thinking about the other, and so you may get the CFO or the CEO or someone in operations may go through and go through a seminar, went to an event, and then decided to buy cyber insurance, but then don't communicate to the rest of the company. And so when it comes to when filing a claim, do we have these things documented? Have we revisited any of our practices, like you said, locking the doors at night? Are we going past just like a turn, little turn knob, and are we doing deadbolts? Are we doing big stuff? And so when it comes to filing claims and the issues with filing them, I want to put this off to you, Kirsten. If you can speak to what it's like for when a company goes to file a claim, what must they know about doing so? Because as Donald was alluding to, some people require that you have a certain level of standards and even documentation to prove that. Do you see that kind of a thing? How's that been on your side?
Yes, and certainly the thing that I would say is the biggest challenge with the technical cyber digital risks is that it's always evolving. And so when you make that attestation, first of all, doing it in partnership with the technical support person, whether that's your managed service person or your IT person, it's really important to ensure that one understands those questions very clearly and to get guidance. Not because even accidental misrepresentation can result in a claim not being covered. And so we see in our world about 10% or a little bit more, either material misrepresentation, accidental misrepresentation, or like in the issue of like social engineering, where money was routed or wired inadvertently. People don't realize that cybercrime coverage, social engineering coverage, is always an add-on, and so oftentimes they think they're covered and they're not. So those are kind of the table stakes for that portion of the conversation. And then, sorry, go ahead. I was going to say, then the next piece is the claim filing itself, which is that, like first, we don't have a deductible for triggering incident response. The breach coach is one of the most important people in an organization with your insurance company. Almost all of them have them, because the first thing they'll tell you to do, well, first they'll figure out if you have a claimable event, but they'll also tell you to call counsel to get this to be privileged. And I cannot emphasize this enough. It is the most important thing. get the event privilege of counsel first, because it protects you, and with all the regulations, and especially in California and New York and Nevada and all these new states, being able to manage this process from a legal and regulatory perspective is essential before you move forward and go through all the enforcement pieces that have to be next.
You mentioned New York right there, and I know California's got a compliance level, but New York's business compliance when it comes to cybersecurity standards are very high. And because the cybersecurity insurance world is a wild, wild west right now, and it's starting to get regulated, as you mentioned earlier, for one, premiums are going to begin to go up. And so, right now people are willing to pay, but soon they're going to figure out that, for one, in order to make sure we have a good claim, we have to make sure that our clients, meaning the insured, are doing their due diligence to make sure that they are changing the locks and they're upgrading, the firmware on equipment, training their employees on how not to send out wire transfers, how to recognize social engineering attacks, but then also to know that it can still happen, because it's a very lucrative business for cyber criminals to continue to do these attacks. And so they're going to continue to find new ways to do so, especially as we educate. They're taking those education systems, so they know what the most educated are looking for, and they're going to continue to try to evolve that. So that's very important. Now, I know with Jafir, you and I have talked about, these different gaps, and where some people are thinking that they're covered on one thing and not another. You want to speak to those pitfalls that you've seen in the past, where people are just not being properly covered, or what they need? Jafir, are you there?
Yeah, I had a little bit of static, so if you could kind of repeat that last part with the question there.
Okay, no, I was just saying I appreciate that. No, I was asking about the references where you and I have talked about, these areas of coverage where, they may not know that they're covered for a particular thing, or may not even have enough coverage. I want to give an opportunity to speak to the Markel approach of doing that, and in your personal experience, what you've seen where, whether they did not have the documentation to show that they were due diligent, or they just did not have the right insurance for something, like they just weren't covered in the right area, like, something that people should know, like, I can't let that happen to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question again. And I appreciate the feedback from, Donald and Kirsten. Excellent information there. In terms of Markel, what I like to promote is that if we owe, we pay fast. So when evaluating an insurance carrier, think about what is their claims culture. Also, in comparison to many of my friendly competitors out there, our forms on the data breach side are not highly exclusionary. They're very broad. It's very broad language. It's easily understood. However, over the past several years, we've seen different exclusions out there that can be problematic. Some are deployed, are still out there. Others might not necessarily be there. But here's some things that you need to be aware of on the exclusion side. Is there a failure to maintain the system exclusion? Is there a mobile device exclusion? Are paper records excluded? Are widespread viruses excluded? Well, again, that goes contrary to reality, because viruses are, in fact, widespread. So those are certain things that, when you're going in, you're looking at a policy form, and it's unusually long. If it's verbose, well, then you got to dig into the coverage to see really what you have. In terms of how things, fail in terms of, claim payments, if you will, what we've seen, I've seen it across the market, is where there is a prior claim or failing to notice in the proper time. And so usually what happens is, speaking to, I believe it was your point earlier, Mike, where, one side of the organization doesn't know what's going on with the other. Like, hey, we have transferred our risk. We have a standard insurance policy to cover cyber, where another part of the organization sees the breach and they try to handle it. They hire forensics. they fail to notice, they pay a ransomware claim, or they hire and pay forensics. Then later they want to tender the claim to the insurance carrier. Well, that's problematic because many insurance forms require consent before payment. So those are some certain things you definitely don't want to follow in that path, because it puts your basically your risk transfer at risk.
Now, I know that you and I have had conversations a few months back about cyber. When your brokers are writing policies, or and they're presenting them, when it comes to compliance and having a set of standards to use to write good policies, to know what the level of risk the customer is at, and then even when it comes to helping that customer lower their premiums, how do you approach that with I know we've talked about having something in place. Do you guys refer to anything? Do you have any kind of a set of standards that you look to say, listen, if you're doing this, then this will cost you $1. But if you do this, I'll only charge you 50 cents to cover the same thing.
Yeah, well, great point. And speaking to the underwriting process, Mike, usually we're going to require an application, a long form application. We want to know the operation, and then we kind of like compare that to our internal experience, our internal underwriting guidelines, depending on what you do and who you do it for. That is going to help us determine the level of exposure that we have. Typically, Markel, we rate on sales. However, sales is certainly not indicative of one's security posture. What I'm concerned about is culture. I'm concerned about their security posture. And does it start at the senior level, like Donald has mentioned? Because if they embrace it in the C-suite, it will get carried out to the middle management and front lines. And what we appreciate definitively, if someone has hired a pre-breach consultant like yourself, we love it, because again, it speaks to the culture of an organization, their seriousness in terms of what the exposures are out there. And if an insurance carrier sees that, okay, my insured has hired a consultant, the consultant has helped them adhere to certain standards, ISO standards, we love that, because it helps us make an affirmative defense.
Yeah, I can imagine that, especially when it even comes to filing a claim. It helps you just have a clear path of what they've been doing, so you can even, as you mentioned, also, Kirsten, which is a very, very important part of cyber insurance, which a lot of people don't realize, is that the response component of it. When it comes to, first of all, you want to make a claim, but as an insurer, you want to know, well, is this thing going to come back again next Tuesday after we've been paid a bunch of money for what we thought was solving a problem? But if you go through, when you send your own response, or not your own response, but when you send a response to men, you're able to get that insight. And so, Kirsten, can you speak to the need for documentation when it comes to that investigation, to then even determine, for one, is it a 100% claim? Is it have you gone in and found that they were not adhering to certain standards, and so there was a reason to either not pay the full claim because they just had nothing. They're running Windows XP everywhere. Have you seen anything like that?
Yes, certainly, or even Windows 7. It's kind of amazing. Oh my gosh, how is that still possible? But it is true, and so I've worked a lot on the NIST standards, and we had talked about before that back in the old days when we were first implementing some of the NIST standards, they were voluminous and everyone hated the consultants who came in to do them, because just getting through the risk control part was really, really hard. Nowadays, there are so many great systems in place to help support that process and support becoming compliant, and also continuous monitoring. And we talk a lot about continuous monitoring from the standpoint of detection, of remediation, and sort of cyber events. but also continuous monitoring can help you maintain that documentation component, where when you are in the midst of a claim, you can show, like to the point that was made earlier around, was this system patched? You can actually show those things. And so being able to have proof, it doesn't mean that you need a library full of information to be able to support that, but it's more about being able to show that in that evolution and in the evolutionary change that happens both in networks and the attack surface, that you're continually maintaining to those standards and you maintain that documentation such that you can provide, it's what we talk about all the time, people, process, technology. So like dual authentication for wires, it's a pain. Yes, it's easier to do it yourself, but also it's very good to be able to make sure you're protecting yourself from those adversaries who are trying to social engineer, who've changed passwords, and those are the things that can really trip people up.
It reminds me of just to hear you guys say these things out loud. It makes me think of like an elevator, like an insured elevator, or any kind of a building maintenance where you're going to insure this elevator for XML, but you need to make sure that someone's checking this thing and it's being documented. And how often did it pass? How often was it tested? Did it fail ever? What was done? What's the maintenance records on this? And so if you're going to insure anything, especially if you're going to insure its complete value at what you want to say it's represented as, you have to show that it's working the way it's supposed to. And so when you're coming to your business and saying, I'm going to secure that you are cyber resilient, you're going to come back from anything, like Jafir said earlier, both Jafir and Donald said, cyber insurance is not a replacement for cyber security. And so you can still have things happen, but if you're not taking care of yourself, yes, you may have cyber insurance, but it's not going to be 100% paid, especially if you haven't been doing your due diligence. And what we've also seen working with clients is that it helps them become a better business because now they're more efficient, because they're looking at these different areas of exposure. They're trying to address these things. They're becoming more efficient. And even right now, as we work with Donald there at Greenfruit, as of this year, we began to implement NIST standards. And so now we're going through and we're treating them as an ISO compliant company where we're constantly monitoring, making changes, making improvements in the environment. And then I believe it was Jafir who mentioned earlier about you now have to look at the entire network and things have got to talk to each other. And because of that, now there's a whole new approach to how we look at cybersecurity. And I know that even with Donald, who happens to have not master's in finance, but also happen to have a master's in information systems, which is kind of a really interesting point to be at. And so I know that with you, as we've talked about IT, you're very, like a lot of CFOs tend to be, are very computer literate, but to even still have these things, attack your environment and be aware of, you have to, and it's good that you recognize that as you work with you guys.
Good, thank you.
Yeah. So I wanted to if you could just Kirsten, if you just come up just a couple of reasons why a claim would get denied, so that people may not know. I know we talked about documentation, but just give a couple of short examples of why a claim would be denied if something they just completely did wrong.
Yes, well, there are two areas. One is just making sure you have the right coverages, because oftentimes, especially around, I would say the most important social engineering one, a lot of those claims are denied just simply because people thought that they had it because they have a cyber policy and didn't realize they didn't. So that's a big one. And we read a lot about those in the newspaper because there's potential ambiguity there. But the other is really the patch management question that we discussed earlier around your being required to have consistent maintenance. And I've seen some trip ups as well there in the maintenance category where they're woefully behind. Yeah, I said I patched all the time, but it turned out that the vulnerability that was exploited was 7 patches ago, and I hadn't updated. And I would say that those are the two areas the most where I would say patch management is an important one. Sometimes it's difficult because what people outside the world don't realize is that can mean having to take on systems that are very inconvenient to shut down to run patches. So it's that delicate balance of being able to manage that process element when you're going through. But those are the areas where I see a lot of challenges.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. Thank you, Kirsten, on that. As you said that, we have had clients where, the machines, the systems are really old or they're very busy. And so, they're afraid to update them. But then, they're not really focused on that kind of a thing. And so they just kind of let it go. But, when it comes back to pre-breach lawsuits and things that are not covered, it can be a claim. We've seen where a particular client or vendor can recognize that you're using something that is outdated and is known to be vulnerable. And so then they can sue you to make sure that you upgrade your system. And that's one of those things that, people want to try to get insured for, like, well, now we got to spend $100,000 to upgrade our systems because we got sued for using an old system. And so that's not only not covered under cyber insurance, but that's also one of those things that can be an area of exposure. And so, Jafir, if you would please chime in on so a couple of reasons why you've seen claims get denied.
Yeah, definitely failing to notice carriers. I touched on that a little bit earlier, and I'll just repeat for emphasis. I mean, that's certainly a sensitive issue, because we know on the claim side, when we get in there and we start doing the investigation, usually for the most part, we can get our arms around the risk and handle it quickly and keep our expenses down. And just being frank, we certainly want to do a service to our community and help people out when they've had a loss and indemnify them, make them whole. But also, insurance companies, we're primarily in business to make a profit. So when something thwarts that, an activity, a bad decision, failing to obtain consent, well, yeah, certainly that it's concerning, because, of course, if we don't owe, then, we don't want to pay. So certainly touching a little bit more on underwriting, where we appreciate a consultant can come in and help is, one, to Kirsten's point, helping to maintain the systems and do proper patchwork. Also, long story short, what I'm concerned about at my desk on a daily basis is how much data do you have? Where does it sit? How is it protected? And how is it segregated in terms of backups? If I can get a comfort level on that and know that my insured has a grip on that, yeah, then I think the process is certainly more fluid in terms of claims handling. We also like to know about folks having live, like, tabletop exercises. What happens if? I mean, that's magnificent, but our insureds have to invest in the pre-breach services, the risk management services, those value-added services that really help insulate our limits.
That's very good. I like that. I know that we've heard a lot about communication and letting people know. Is there a standard time in which someone like Donald is supposed to report to the insurance, to their broker? Is there, first of all, do you guys create like any kind of like a cheat sheet on what to do when you have an issue? But also, like, what's the standard time they should respond? Is it like a day? Is it a week? Like, what is the
depending on the incident, for the most part, it's as soon as practicable, but that might vary depending on the size of the organization. Donald mentioned if his organization is 100 million or more, what's reasonable for them is not reasonable for a small mom and pop organization or a large multinational. So
Right.
It really depends. Certainly, if there is a business interruption due to system failure, well, if a company is dependent on the internet to do their business, yeah, we're going to know about that pretty quickly. And usually the timelines on something like that could be about 8 to 12 hours, if not a little less. Reputational harm. If a company's reputation has been harmed because of an unauthorized access and bad publicity, maybe inside of 30 days, we're going to know something about that. So it really kind of just depends. But I think if one is ethical and thinks, okay, if I wanted to know this, when would I want this shared with me? If I were in the other chair, yeah, kind of like adhere to that. But again, one has to be responsible to Kirsten's comments, making sure that they're in compliance with their own organization's guidelines. Make sure they've considered counsel if needed, so they can adhere to all the governing cyber standards based on their industry.
Right. Thank you for that. Hey, Donald, I wanted to ask, as someone who is insured, do you know, like, I know the other day when I was here at the office, we were talking about, as we were social distancing, working on your team setup. Do you know, do you have a clearly defined list of or set of policies for how to report your insurance claim? Like, have they made that clear to you? Do you know, like, oh, I have to report in X amount of time? Do you have that kind of insight?
I don't have. I would say, Mike, because I've dealt this a little bit. If I had to say I have a defined set of procedures and protocols, no, because my carrier changes. I think it's changed twice already. But I do know that if in the event there is some type of anything that may be questionable, what I've learned is you might want to get them on the line sooner than later. And that way, at least bring notice to the broker or the carrier that, hey, I experienced this. I'm not really sure what the outcome is going to be. Give them, get you involved, or get the IT person involved so they can maybe explain it more on a technical level. And that way you get them on the horn or hook a little sooner than later. And that way, in the event there is a compromise or something's happening or whatever, that they can, they'll be more up to help. Otherwise, if something happens and you wait 6 or 8 months down the road, it almost becomes a moot point. So it's something you want to do pretty much immediately.
Hey, Mike.
Yeah.
Mike, if I could just pivot on that,
Yes.
Sometimes when we issue our forms, we can have instructions on kind of like what to do in case of a claim, because again, what we want to avoid is people trying to manage their claim on their own. Many carriers do have hotlines, so if you have a claim, you need to call claims. But if you are wondering, okay, is this something, not really sure, pick up the phone. We do have, attorneys available 24 hours a day to be able to decide if there is a there there.
Yeah, that's important as part of that response team to know that you have that available to call. Kirsten, did you want to chime in on that?
Yes, I mean, that's the breach coach I had mentioned earlier that I think is so invaluable, because they can really help you navigate even the forms at the moment. Is this a shareable event? What's the order in which I need to do this? Do we need to trigger incident response or an attorney first? So those are the pieces that are really, really valuable. And insurance companies provide so much additional support. And in fact, many policies now even rebate a portion of their policies for risk mitigation. So they're usually at the beginning or end of the form where it says that if you have invested in risk mitigation, that a percentage of your policy may be refundable because you are taking the extra steps to protect yourself in a different way and get an outside third party to support you. And that can be managed services, that can be risk reviews, wheeled-up exercises, all the stuff that Peter mentioned. But that's something to take a look at, because it could be 10 to 20% of your policy. And even if it's a little policy, it's $100 more or $200 more than you had 5 minutes ago. So it's certainly worth looking at.
Oh, that's really important. No, I didn't know.
Oh, yeah, I mean, yeah, for sure. I mean, we can share. Yeah, I mean, we can share. We can give money back from the deductible, that type of thing. Because again, I don't want you to think that we're afraid to pay claims or we don't want to. No, of course. Now, we want to be there for our insurers. We don't want to be at risk for bad faith claims. So we kind of stick to our guns in our approach. But certainly you want to take advantage of everything that kind of Kirsten has kind of chimed on. Yeah, certainly there's opportunities to reduce coverage in terms of deductible payback there.
Yeah, I think that's important. I think with any contract, just revisiting if there are incentives for doing something more. I mean, it's even like, what is it, the Geico one where, you know, if you put this thing in your car and you show that you are following and complying with all this, you know, the safety standards of driving, then they'll lower, you know, your claims or your policy amount. So once again, as cyber starts to evolve and become more like other industries, I think that'll become, you know, people should consider revisiting it and treating it like others. So with that being said, it just hit the 12 o'clock hour. So I want to kind of begin to wrap it up and say thank you to everybody for being here. It's you know, to take your time out of it on this busy day is something I'm truly grateful for. I want to point out really quickly how HEAD can help. And as we did this today, we know we do have a cyber insurance compliance program that we do provide for our clients, which we're also doing right now for Greenfield Avocados. We also do cybersecurity policies. And so coming in doing risk assessments for your organizations and helping you create policies so that you can have these standards in place, that you can lower your insurance premiums, as well as response services. So as Jafir mentioned earlier, being able to be available after an incident happens, we can come in and work with your organization to help you guys get back up and running. We have flat rates for doing so, and so it makes it very easy. And we can just come in, it's all hands on deck, depending whatever is needed. So, and then the last thing being just cybersecurity consulting. We can come in and help you guys with whatever you need. So, what you should do today, if you have any questions, you can give us a call direct at 818-356-7187. We can also come down and help you with your cyber risk management. First thing you should do is go back, like Jafir said and Donald was saying, you know, you got to get your top management on board with cybersecurity and, you know, looking into getting cyber risk insurance so that you are covering all aspects of your organization and implementing good security policies as well. And then just make sure you review everything and you have everything that you need to make a good claim. I want to say thank you once again to all of our guests today. Kirsten Bay taking time out, CEO of Cyassurance. Jafir Young, Senior Account Representative over there at Markel, not just cyber, but also many other areas of coverage. And Donald Carter, I know you are super busy taking time out of your day, CFO for Green Fruit Avocados. I know last I heard it was 8, but something tells me you guys have probably gone up in the number of avocado importers to the U.S. But
yeah, we're hitting right around number 4.
Yeah, see, I know you guys are continuing to grow, and so I appreciate you guys all taking time out today. Kirsten, once again, thank you. Jafir.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Pleasure being here.
Donald, thank you very much. Kelly, I know that Kelly's also here with us.
Yes, thank you all very much for joining us. And if there's anything that HEAD can do to help you, please feel free to give me a call. We're doing a special where you get coffee with Kelly, where I send you a lovely Starbucks gift card to buy yourself a coffee while we discuss all your cyber needs. So let me know if there's anything we can do to help. And thank you all very much for joining us today. And again, thank you to our panelists.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great day.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.